Hey everyone, welcome back to Football Talk with Vinny. In today's video, we're going to be going over the New England Patriots. So obviously going into free agency, they did have a lot of money to spend. So they had, I think, the third or fourth most cap space of any NFL team, and they definitely decided to use it all this year. So let's start with the guys they lost first. Obviously, Julian Edelman decided to retire, and they did not want to re-sign Joe Thuney to a long-term deal. He actually signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. But they obviously had a bunch of money, and they did use it. They signed so many players, so let's get right into it. He signed guys like Matthew Judon. They traded for Trent Brown, the left tackle from the Oakland Raiders. They re-signed Kyle Van Noy after a couple seasons in Miami. Hunter Henry, also Jonnu Smith, the two tight ends. They were able to sign Jalen Mills, a cornerback, Nelson Aguilar, some depth at wide receiver, also Kendrick Bourne, another wide receiver from the San Francisco 49ers. They were able to re-sign J.C. Jackson, and also Cam Newton did re-sign another one-year deal. Man, that was a lot of players. Now, usually with most teams, I only go over the major signings, the guys that I think are going to be starters on the roster, and usually there's not many, right? If you look at some teams and you look at their signings, there's usually 15 or 20 signings, but a lot of those guys are going to be rotational players. If not, maybe they only get a snap or two on special teams. Whereas all these guys that I named, all of these guys are probably going to be starters for the New England Patriots this upcoming season. You know, the only guy that I named that might not be a starter and get multiple snaps might be Kendrick Bourne. Unfortunately, because the Bucs won the Super Bowl as well, a lot of people think that the Patriots didn't have as good a year as they had. I mean, they won 7 games with the roster that they had, and I think they significantly upgraded the talent on the entire roster. And I think, obviously, before the whole COVID thing hit Cam and the rest of the New England Patriots, they actually started the season pretty well. And they had a couple of tough losses. It was like a 1 or 2 point loss to the Seattle Seahawks early in the year. That was that goal line stand that Seattle had. It might have been like a 4-point loss. But they had a couple early losses that were very close where, you know, they win a game or two here and there, and they might have made the playoffs last year with that roster. And considering the guys they signed, they should be significantly better this year than they were last year. And although I do think that Tom Brady was, at least last offseason, people were thinking that he was done, and I was in that camp saying, you know, I think Tom Brady unfortunately just had a bad roster in New England, or at least a bad offensive roster. He is still an elite player, and I think obviously based on the season, I was proven right. And obviously Brady showed everyone that he is still, you know, playing at an elite level. I also am from the camp of, I think that Bill Belichick is a fantastic coach, and I don't think that Brady has significantly more to do with the reason why the Patriots were so dominant as Bill Belichick. I think that if you look at the roster New England had, the fact that they won 7 games, only a great head coach like Bill Belichick would have got that roster to win 7 games. I mean, you even look at one of the losses against the Buffalo Bills. That was a game that came down to the wire, and you're talking about a Bills team that was 13-3 and got to the AFC Championship game, and they actually played a very close game with them. Now, before we get into the draft, let me go over the money real quick. They actually still have $13 million after spending all that money on those players. So if they did want to maybe make a late trade before the season starts, or maybe sign a guy like Richard Sherman or something like that, although with Richard Sherman, we'll probably get into that in another video about what happened with him. And then for next year, they actually have $26 million to spend. So again, if they don't spend any of the 13 this year, they'll have 39 for next year. So they'll be able to sign, you know, another 3-4 guys next year as well to maybe really fill out the rest of the roster. And then lastly, before we get into the draft, the whole Stephon Gilmore trade talk has kind of really died down. I think he's definitely probably going to play for the New England Patriots. Knowing me, as soon as I post a video, he'll probably get traded and I'll have to make another video. But at this point, I don't think that that's going to be likely unless a team is willing to give up a first-round pick, which it doesn't seem like they're going to, because to me, if I was going to trade for a guy like Stephon Gilmore, you want to do it early in the offseason because he is on a significant contract this year, but if you trade for him, you probably want to give him an extension, so you probably want to work that in before you spent the money that you spent this offseason. Okay, with that being said, let me get into the draft. Obviously, the huge news, they took a quarterback, Mac Jones, at pick 16. Now, I really love the pick. Obviously, they were projected to take a quarterback anyways, and at this point, they actually were able to just stand where they were at, and he just actually fell to him, which is great. If you're New England, you didn't have to give up any additional assets to get a quarterback of the future, and I think that's what he is. To me, I think Cam Newton is the clear-cut starter, although Mac Jones is probably the smartest quarterback coming into the draft. I think if you have a quarterback like Cam Newton, it is better when you have someone like that to just wait on Mac Jones. Don't put him in right away. Give him time to kind of learn the offense. And also, if you're New England, you're trying to win now, you're trying to get to the playoffs. So I think having a veteran like Cam Newton is actually better to start the season. Now, if you're talking midway through the season, if Cam starts to struggle a little bit, maybe you can work in Mac Jones and see how he plays. And obviously, if you are Bill Belichick and the entire coaching staff, you're going to see Mac Jones in practice. So if he starts to show that he's just a better quarterback than Cam Newton, then of course, he's done it before with Brady, with not putting Drew Bledsoe back in after he got hurt. So he showed you he can do it before. So I think if Mac Jones shows early that he is the better quarterback, I don't think Bill Belichick will have any problem with making Mac Jones the starter and making Cam the backup. But I do think the way Cam played last year, regardless of the weapons he had or actually didn't have, I think the fact that they signed a bunch of weapons is going to make Cam's stats look a little better because he's going to have actual guys to throw the ball to. But let's go over the rest of the draft. At pick 38, they took a defensive tackle, Christian Barrymore. He actually was projected to be a late first-round pick, so I think if you're New England, you got a steal of a defensive lineman. And then at pick 96, they took another defensive lineman, a D-end at this point, Ronnie Perkins. So obviously if you're New England, you took the quarterback of the future, and then you're building how New England always builds, which is from the front out. And then quickly, let me just go over the rest of the draft. At pick 120, they took a running back, Ramadre, probably am pronouncing that so wrong, Stevenson. And then at pick 177, they took Cameron McGrone, a linebacker. At pick 188, they took a safety, Joshua Bledsoe. At pick 197, they took an offensive tackle, William Sherman. I almost said Richard Sherman. And then at pick 242, Trey Nixon, a wide receiver. And again, I like to focus on the top 100. Those are guys that are actually going to be either starters or make a significant contribution for the team. So again, obviously with those first 100 picks, you took 2 defensive linemen, a D tackle, a D end, and a quarterback really of the future. He could play this year, and obviously we'll find out, but I think Cam will probably be the starter to start the season. So obviously I like the draft anytime you can come away with the quarterback of the future. As long as the guy actually develops into that, it's a good draft, even if you don't hit on any of the other picks. As for this year specifically, if he's not going to get any reps and Cam is the starter, you're really just relying on that second and that third round pick to come in and contribute for you. But obviously the way that New England's offseason went is they spent so much money on free agency, they signed so many players that even if none of the draft picks work out and the quarterback doesn't play at all because Cam is good, that won't really hurt them as much because they signed so many guys to help contribute to that football team in the free agency market. Now, as for the projections for the regular season, I really do think the team is going to be a very good team. I think their defense was pretty good last year. Obviously, it was elite 2 years ago, but it was pretty good last year. They're going to have a couple guys come back who opted out. A couple of those guys did retire, like the safety Patriots, but they're still getting a couple guys back that did opt out. And obviously with the guys like Matthew Judon and Jalen Mills and also Kyle Van Noy, you are bringing a couple of good defensive playmakers to that defense. And again, you don't need much because their defense was already good last year, and obviously the offense is what needed help. And you signed 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, right? You're trying to give Cam Newton some more weapons to work with, and I think signing the 2 tight ends is really big. So I think by getting the tight ends, it's going to make easier throws for Cam, right? It's going to make easier reads because if everything is within 5 to 10 yards, everything's just easier, right? Easier reads to make. And obviously with the tight ends, they're more security blankets. So whenever things break down for Cam, he's able to get the ball out to one of the tight ends. And obviously that will help his completion percentage as well. And again, looking at last year, they were able to win 7 games. I don't think people realize that enough. So I think with the additions they made, they're at least an extra win or 2. So to me, I really have New England as like a 9, anywhere from like a 9 to an 11 win team. And I think the 11 wins will just depend on how they fare against the Buffalo Bills, right? I think the Bills are clearly the best team in the division. But again, like I said, last year, one of those games, it came down to the wire. The Patriots were driving for a game-winning touchdown when the Buffalo Bills were able to strip Cam Newton. So, had they scored a touchdown there, that game might have ended in a Patriots win. So I think it'll just depend on how they do against Buffalo. If Buffalo sweeps them, I think they're closer to the 9-win team. If they can get a game or 2 on Buffalo, right, then they can get to about 10 wins. But I do think that they are a playoff team this year. I think they have so much depth Obviously, they have one of the greatest coaches of all time, so I really like what they've done this offseason. But that's going to do it for this video. It's probably one of the longer ones, other than maybe the first couple I did. But again, if you got this far, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to leave a like and also subscribe. It does help the channel out a lot. And I look forward to the next video. Bye.